Howdy. Thanks to everyone for dropping by. The program for this afternoon, late this afternoon, is choosing and using lenses for nature and wildlife photography. And for the next about hour and 58 minutes, I will try very hard not to put you to sleep like this brown pelican. And if you keep both eyes open and looking straight ahead, the hope is that you'll leave smiling and have lots to tell your friends about. And we are a small group and questions are welcome, so open your mouth and let everybody hear your question. If they don't, I'll be glad to repeat it. Now wait a second, here I am going to teach you about choosing and using lenses, and the first thing I tell you is it ain't the lens. You know, people see me standing behind my 800 and go, oh, if I had that lens, oh, I'd be famous, blah, blah, blah. And then a lot of times I'll say to them, well, why don't you put a flash card in and take a few pictures? And almost invariably, especially if I have a teleconverter on, the first thing they say is, can you get the bird in the viewfinder? Forget about the fact that we need to focus accurately, determine the right exposure, and design a pleasing image by using autofocus whatever way. And you have to often do that in 1 second. Forget about that part. So for me, God's honest truth, I don't feel I have any special talent. The only talent that I've had for the last 28 or 29 years is the willingness to work hard, trying to be good at what I love to do. But I really don't think, in the beginning I put every bird right in the middle of the frame. I don't have any great artistic talents or anything, but again, working hard will get you past that. Yes?
Sorry for interrupting. I need to see your face to understand.
Okie doke.
So if you were up here.
Then you need to sit in the back a little. No, I'm kidding.
I can switch to the back.
So, see this photograph of a baby green heron, blah, blah, blah. Oh, you got a big lens. Yeah, if I had that lens, blah, blah, blah. Only sometimes things can be deceiving. That's the 70-200 f4, which is, boy, right now B&H is pushing that thing. They have 1 million specials and a lot of killer good ones. So, when I first made it to the big time and got to digital, my first big lens was the 600 f4, all 13 point something pounds of it, and the thing was brutally heavy. In San Diego for the Pelicans, the 600 alone with a 1.3 crop factor camera, and then with the teleconverter making it to 840 millimeters, and with the teleconverter for flight, roseate spoonbill, and another one coming in, everybody loves pink, and at Bosque the snow geese. And this year we were hurting for this kind of image because the corn, as I mentioned in the first one, was knocked down way back from the road because the festival had been 2 weeks before, and we didn't have any south winds at all. We had almost relentless north winds, birds gonna fly away from you. So we wanna point our shadow at the bird. In the morning we want a south or east winds, so the birds are coming at us. A 600 and a teleconverter. And one of the things that remains true to this day with your 500 and 600 millimeter lenses is that unless you practice and learn to use them with the 2x teleconverter. Did I actually zip this thing shut? Yeah. You need to practice and refine your sharpness techniques so that you can use your 500 as a 1,000 millimeter lens and your 600 as a 1,200 millimeter lens. And that goes double now for the 500 and 600 now that the 1DX can autofocus to f8. Since it's a full frame camera, the 2X is really an important tool. And so many people who invest 6, 8, 10 grand in a big lens, do you ever use it with the 2X? No. You gotta practice. My friend Ned Harris, who's a great photographer, saw him out at Bosque. He finally bought the 500 and he got the 2X, and he called me after a couple of days and said, Artie, I can't make a sharp picture with the 2X. I said, Ned, stick with it, get your face in the back of the camera, get your hand on the top or the bottom of the lens, and you'll get it. And 10 days later, he called me back and said, I got it. So it does take some practice, but if you're not utilizing the 2X teleconverters, you're not getting the full advantage. This is 600, 2x, laying on the ground with the tripod legs spread wide. And one of my favorite situations, very rare, subject in the shade, background in the sun. Just beautiful effect. 16 to 35, I use it rarely. I generally will borrow it when I go to Galapagos or to Antarctica, the Southern Ocean trips. This one, Denise and I were in Jackson Hole, and these are the famous Mormon barns. And yes, if you look at the pictures on the right, they're much more accurately represented than up here. And David Brommer told us that they hope to be getting one of these giant ones of those for the front for the next time we come. Truly a place to be on your bucket list. This is St. Andrews Bay in the Southern Ocean at South Georgia. And this is the January trip. And there's something like 300,000 pairs of king penguins breeding on this vast plain. So from high up on the ridge, 16 to 35 on the tripod. I'm going to take a second to open this. I have too many things in my bag of tricks. And when I want to shoot at a slow shutter speed, I find the, I thought it was in here, maybe I took it out. The little Giotto's ball head. I spin off the mongoose, put the ball head on, P5 camera body plate, and have a short lens mounted on the tripod, especially in low light, in the dark, moving water blurs and stuff like that. Here we are at Bosque in the pre-dawn and the 16 to 35 with the big sky. Then I went really wide angle to the 8 to 15 fisheye. Same morning, 2 minutes apart with the 8 to 15 fisheye. And it's a really cool lens, but it is really hard to work with. Just think, 8mm on a full frame camera, you're seeing 180 degrees. So if the sun is out and you're pointing your shadow at the subject, you're in the picture. Your shadow is going to be in the picture, no matter what you do. And if you turn around and you face the sun, you have the worst god-awful flare you've ever seen. And you can't use a lens hood because you're seeing out this way. So it's great in the pre-dawn. Here we are at White Sands, and it's great before the sun comes up. But once the sun is up, you are hurting. You're excused, young lady. These are what I call my B-roll lenses. I always have one in my vest, except right now it needs to be repaired. It's home. After 50,000 uses, the shutter blades are sticking. But it's great to have a medium zoom in your vest, a million uses for it. I started with the 28 to 135, and we climbed up to an eagle nest, so I wanted to show the baby eagles and the background up in Katmai. And rarely at 135 can you use these things for bird photographs. This was on in Antarctica, or actually in the Falkland Islands on my 2007 trip. And boy, we were in Iceland and we're walking along, and all of a sudden, we didn't even know the natural history of the place. A whole bunch of common eider females ran off the nests and they went into the pond. Said, okay, as long as we're here, if you have a 24 to 105, take your lens out, shoot straight down to get the classic shot of the eider down. We have 1.5 minutes and then we're getting out of here. We backed off, the birds all came onto the nest, and we got the picture. I'm a lover of what is, so we had one morning at Lake Blue Cypress near my home in Central Florida, and the clients were already close to an hour late to go out on the boat, and they called and said, we left something back at the motel, we'll be there in an hour. So most people would go, you know, my friend Jim Niger, who has the boat, he wanted to be cursing them out and yada yada. And I said, hey, let's love what is, let's take a walk down by the lake and see what we can do. So I brought the 24 to 105, made this photograph on a foggy morning, and now it's in tile behind my kitchen sink when I redid my home. Here we're going to get on a boat to go out to Bonaventure Island in Percé, Quebec, and I get out on the motel what's the word I'm looking for? Like the veranda, but there's another word.
Balcony?
The balcony. And here's this beautiful scene. Here's Persay, the dock, and there's Pierced Rock. That's the name with the hole in it. And then just the tip of Bonaventure. And I make a 5-frame stitched panel with the 24-105. And with the shorter lenses, IS is even more ridiculous. The people report making sharp pictures at a half second. This is about at a quarter, which is ridiculous, but sharp enough to make a nice panel. And then on rare occasions, you get to use the lens at 50 millimeters, peeking over the rim of a nest of a great egret, with the little sleeping chicks. At Bosque, again, it's below Albuquerque, New Mexico, 70 miles. I've been going there 18 years. This was year 18 since the death of my wife Elaine in 1994. And it can be, if you look on the side screens, it can be absolutely breathtaking. There are mornings and evenings when I'm done photographing and I get in the car and I just start crying. And I'm not sure why. It's just amazing place, amazing light. But certainly here, this is at about 35 millimeters. And it's way pre-dawn. So I need to take the mongoose off and need to put the little Giotto's ball head on with the camera body plate, level it, and make the pictures. Again, every time that I've ever left my car without having the 24-105 in my vest, I generally get 50 yards away and I regret it. So here we're at La Jolla Shores Beach in San Diego, and we're photographing Marble Godwits, and that is Torrey Pines, the cliffs of Torrey Pines reflecting in the late afternoon light, the beautiful golden colors, and I see this beautiful patterns in the wave. So my vest was up on the beach. I just brought the big lens up, put it down, handheld, took the 24-105 on, made a bunch of photographs. Here we are in the Galapagos. Again, grab it out of the vest and do an in-camera, not an in-camera, this is Photomatics HDR with a little grunge of some Galapagos tortoises in the muck and mire. Anybody here use a 400-5.6? That's affectionately, I'll be there in 1 second, Elliot. My old toy lens, I was the one that put that thing on the map for bird photography. I went to a LEP seminar, saw some pictures he made with the 600 f4 and autofocus, and they were all sharp. So, oh my God, autofocus, that works. Only lens I could afford was the 400-5.6. I got a Canon AE1 at the time, and then every single person who was doing bird photography then had to have one. So they sold a bunch, and it's still a great lens. Today I need a lens with IS. Elliot.
Before we move on to the longer lenses, what about the 17-40?
If I were a landscape photographer, I'd certainly own it. There are times, obviously, if I'm in that focal length range, that it would make a better image with less barrel distortion, but I just can't afford the weight, and I'm not a landscape photographer, so I skip that. But if you own one and you have landscapes and you have it in your vest, it's going to make better pictures than 24-105. So who's that guy?
You.
That's me in the way old days. Yeah, that was after I retired from teaching. I just had something taken off my face. If you remember that first picture, I have a big hood, so I take sun protection seriously, and I believe it's better to protect with clothing, SPF 30 clothing, than with chemicals. And I only used it a little bit with digital. This is on the causeway at Merritt Island. This is a fish crow with the 400-5.6. And probably the last picture in my collection that I made with the 400-5.6, a wood stork from a pontoon boat somewhere in the west central Florida. The much maligned Canon 100-400. If you read about it online, it's not sharp wide open, it breaks too easily, blah, blah, blah. So I used one for years and I loved it. Denise absolutely loves her more than life itself. And you know, the ability to zoom out when you need to can often save the day. This is a cover of my friend Scott Weidensol's book, Return to Wild America, a rare afternoon with clouds at Bosque at about 130 millimeters. And then at the long end, wide open, 400, super sharp. So all these people that are telling you that the lens is no good, they really should get out and use one. You know, most of these experts that are trashing everything online, they've never even photographed anything.
The bird's tongue is interesting.
That's the tongue, and yes, it is interesting. That's a western gull. And then at Bosque, I used to love it as a zoom lens, and I still miss it at times. And you'll see my solution, because a lot of times, even with the 1.4 teleconverter, the 70 to 200 still is a 280, especially with my full frame. I don't quite have enough reach. But this is with the 100 to 400, a pleasing blur. And we put the flash on and lay down in the grass, because the cranes are very wary. And if you're standing up, they'll fly right around you. But if you just go off by yourself and get down in the weeds and point up, you can have them fly right over your head. And you know, the Kodak #1 lesson for just people going out and taking pictures is to get closer to your subject. So in a situation like this, the lady is banding western sandpipers up in Cordova, Alaska. I can stand well back from the crowd, zoom into 400, get through a little opening and make a nice picture. And what she's doing here is puffing on the bird's breast feathers to see how much fat is laid on the breast for migration as they feed on the mud flats up there. The 300 f4 is still in production, amazingly. It's probably the oldest lens that's up here that's still in production. It's lightweight, it's little, it's, I'm not sure what it weighs. It's 300 millimeter focal length. It's an f4, so it takes a teleconverter. So if you have a 7D, you have a 300 f4 is 420 times 1.6. So you're out there at 756 millimeters something with a lightweight lens. And this is the one repeat from before on film in a big storm with Fuji Velvia, and probably with a 1D Mark II and a 1.4 teleconverter, a black turn up in British Columbia. And the coolest thing about this lens, the 300 f4, is great close focusing. I think it has the biggest magnification of any Canon telephoto because it focuses so close to like 1.5 meters or something ridiculous. So that's a little mayfly, probably with a teleconverter and one extension.
Is that cropped? Cropped?
Not much, pretty fighting to just fit them in the frame. Yeah, I mean the 300 f4 with a teleconverter and an extension tube. Medium-sized flowers, butterflies, dragonflies, killer lens with lots of working distance.
Teleconverters, they come in different sizes.
With Canon, there's a 1.4, which is on here on the 70 to 200, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And then this I know is in here. That's the 2X. And that's the one you want to, if you have a big lens, you want to learn how to use it effectively. And we'll see more about the 300 2.8, this little puppy, and my trip to South Georgia and the Falklands. The 28 to 300, when it came out, I said I'll borrow this for Bosque, and I made this picture at 50 millimeters.
Yeah.
So if I have a 70 to 200 or a 100 to 400, I'm out of luck. So this lady had kept emailing me saying, oh, we have no money, we're poor. Would you please take us out? And she sent me so many emails, I finally said yes. So on Thanksgiving afternoon and the next morning, I took her and her husband out, and this was God's gift to me for being a nice guy. It's beautiful storm clouds. And this was honored in a Nature's Best contest. But I only used it the one time. But it'd be a great lens for Bosque. And if I were going on a trip and I could only bring one lens, sort of a photojournalist business, the 28 to 300 is mighty attractive. And it's an L lens, high quality, image stabilized, the whole bit. Then they came out with the 70 to 300, a white lens, only I think that the folks at Canon, the engineers, were drunk. because they put the zoom ring where the focusing ring is on all the other lenses, and then obviously the focusing ring is where the zoom thing is. So when I was using it in Svalbard, Norway, every time I had to pick the lens up, I had to say, this is the zoom, and physically think about putting my hand on. If you're using it as a single lens, again, a great travel lens, and incredibly sharp focus and quick focusing. So in Bosque, the guy that came from Australia, Tom Rumbo, he had the 70-300 as his intermediate telephoto. And when you get used to it, it's great. The old Canon 300-2.8 I borrowed once when we went up to Homer to use it, and it was great, but the eagles were too close. So I used to say, boy, it's a great lens for the world's best hawk photographers, and Brian K. Wheeler and Jim Zip and Ned Harris, they all use 300-2.8s, and with great success for flying Raptors. And then end of December, the folks at Cheeseman's Ecology Safaris were on this big pitch about they didn't want us bring big lenses and blah, blah, blah. So I was trying to get a 400-2.8, and fortunately at the last second that fell through. And I borrowed a 300-2.8 II. Now again, sometimes as much as I love Canon, I am an explorer of light and they're paying me to be here today, but when they need to be criticized, I criticize them. So this is the 300-2.8 II. It weighs about only 8 ounces less than the old 300-2.8, which is a fine and fabulous lens. It's also the image stabilized version. The only thing they did stupidly here was, on the old lens you can take the tripod collar off. On this one you can't take it off. So your 7 ounces of weight savings just went out the water in, down the drain in spades. It's a hand-holdable lens for flight. They're never going to make, this model is never going to have it come off, but it was just a ridiculous decision on their part. But you'll see what I think about the lens other than that. This is in January at St. Andrews Bay, an 80th of a second at f/32. And then I started using it, this is from last year, with teleconverters and hand holding it with the 1.4 and a Mark IV. So I got 300 times 1.4 is 420 times 1.3. 3 is 540 or something. So I have a nice focal length, light enough to hand hold. And this is on a tripod, the 300-2.8 II and the 2X and the Mark IV. And when Chris Robinson, the editor of Outdoor Photographer, saw this and saw it was made with the 2X, he said, my God, that lens has to be so sharp as to not even be believable. Macaroni penguins, allopreening. So for a good part of that trip, the 300-2.8 with the 2X was my long lens, and admittedly that was with a 1.3 crop factor camera, the 1D Mark IV, but that was before the 1DX came out. 300 f4 down in Japan, and I might have this one in this program twice. This is in the pre-dawn light. You see the earth shadow blue and the pink skies. And at the Eikan Crane Center in Japan, the 300 f4 was deadly with the 1.4 teleconverter, a Japanese red crown crane landing, and they would feed fish to the cranes. And the raptors would come over and the snow would act like a giant reflector. And oh man, it was too much fun. This is black-eared kite. And when we went to the monkey park, I used the 70-200 a lot. This is the 300 and the 1.4 of a nursing snow monkey baby, and then a nice snow monkey family.
Are they semi-tame?
It's a crazy situation. And a lot of us shared the same thing. We were going to this place, we'd heard of it, the monkey park, Jigakurandu, outside of Tokyo an hour. And they have a hot springs there. And we were all dreaming of this natural stream coming down. And then we get there, and it really was a lot like a zoo. There's a a round stone tub that they built about 8 meters around, 8 meters in diameter. And then in the morning, the monkeys are free and wild. In the morning, the guy comes and he calls them and he throws out food, grain for them to eat. And they come down and they will bite you. They are free and wild. They do fight. They do all their natural behaviors. But it's somewhat akin to being in a zoo. These guys were sitting on the food container, posing. But still, so we were all going, we had these dreams of this wonderful wild place, and then we get there and it's pretty much a zoo. But rest assured, in the BBC every year you will see pictures of snow monkeys in Nature's Best contest in National Wildlife, and every single photograph of a snow monkey that you see will be taken at the monkey park outside of Tokyo. Then after a whole bunch of years of carrying the 600 f4, I said, man, oh man, I'm getting older and this lens keeps getting heavier. So I am going to buy a 500. I eventually bought 2 of them. It was so popular that we used to rent it out on the IPTs. And one of the great things about and by the way, one thing I should have said, how many people here use Nikon? A bunch, good. How many use Canon? Anybody use anything else? Olympus, okay. It makes no difference what system you're using. Photography is not about the system. Whatever you have in your hands, if you're a good photographer, you'll make good pictures. And you know, I bought a Canon AE1 to take pictures of my daughters, and then when I bought the 400-5.6 manual focus, I stuck with Canon, and that's why I use Canon. And today, one of the things I say is that if you could prove to me with scientific tests that Nikon focused 4 times better than Canon, and it could go to noise levels 3 stops better than Canon, I would not switch, because they've been so good to me for 16, 18 years. Loyalty is important to me. And then none of that is true anyway, but. The 500, to come down from the old 500, from the old 600 to the old 500, you were going from 13 plus pounds, then they made a slightly lighter one, 11 something pounds. Now you're coming down to 8 pounds. Boy, it's huge difference, and it's so much smaller. So it's easy to travel with on a plane. It's easier to get on the ground with it. It's easier to work with the car in it. The 600 was a big bear. So here I am in South Texas, photographing green jay from a blind with a 1.4 teleconverter. And the f4 is real nice. This is in Ecuador. They have this new ecotourism business where these local guys find out there's bird watchers around, and they go digging up worms. And in this situation, we went by the side of the road, and the guy had cleared a little spot, and there were leaves on the bottom, and he took his little paper cup with worms, and he stood in there in the clearing, and he said, "Conchita, Conchita, come here, Conchita." And out comes this beautiful rufous-crowned antpitta, which is a super rare bird, and then photograph him at a 60th of a second with no flash, with ISO 1600 or something. So unique opportunities with digital. Another repeat. The 500 Niagara Falls at an 1/8 of a second, and a 30th of a second with flash near my home in Central Florida, down by the lake, 5 minutes from my house. And we have this one as a big canvas print. We go up to Katmai and we get very close to the bears, and the bears get very close to us. And here, usually when they catch a salmon, they go to the other side of the stream, they sense you. This guy decided to come to my side of the stream. So I slowly backed up a little, and then he wound up like 18, 19 feet away, right at minimum focus distance. And my initial reaction was, what kind of picture do I make? I can't even fit his head in the frame. And then as I was trying to compose through the viewfinder, I saw the fish's eye poking through the claws, so I made a fisheye picture. The 500 was great for Africa because it was so light. This was just a cover of Ranger Rick 6 months ago. 500 with the 1.4, and his belly is full of zebra, and he's pulling on Mama's tail saying, I want more. And in Central Florida or South Florida, a great egret with a baby blowfish. I remember I promised I wasn't going to tell stories, but I'm so bad. The first time I saw a pelican catch what I thought was a baby blowfish on the dock at Placida, where we photographed brown and white pelicans on the Southwest Florida IPT, I said to the group, look, that pelican's got a baby blowfish. And everybody goes, no, it's a ping pong ball. And I go, no, it's a baby blowfish. And they go, no, it's a ping pong ball. And I go, no, it's a baby blowfish. And finally he throws it up in the air, it lands in the water, and the little tail comes out and it swims away. And I say, see, I told you I was right. The only problem is nobody took a picture. Oh man, we got lots of repeats. I need a whooping. 500, 15th of a second, slow shutter speed at Nickerson Beach, migrant common turns just at sunset, backlit. And the first time I went to Antarctica, I brought the 500, and I brought my trusty 2X teleconverter. And everybody said, you're crazy. Bring a 500 to Antarctica? The birds are tame. So then I made pictures like this baby Adelie penguin, and I'll show you another one and wait for the punchline. I should have had them together. 500 with the 2X, ISO 1000, that was with the original 1D. And then the image stabilization on these big lenses is amazing. Here I am in a dugout canoe. My shutter speed is 1/160th of a second. The dugout canoe is rocking, even though I've threatened everyone with death for even breathing, but still there's always going to be movement, and make a sharp picture of a malachite kingfisher. And that's the picture that should have been in the other one. 500 in the 2X. So when I got back and I showed pictures like this and the baby Adelie penguin headshot, because even though the birds are tame, they don't want you getting within 7 feet of the babies, and they keep you back from the birds. So long focal lengths fit my vision. I love to see in little squares. So when I got back and I started sharing these pictures, a lot of people wrote me and said, I think I'm going to bring my long lens to Antarctica next time. These were the same people who told me I needed only a 70 to 200. Thank you. At Bosque, we had a snowstorm one year, the day after Thanksgiving, and I was using the 800 lens all the time, and quick like a bunny, I ran into the trunk and got out the old 500 because I needed to be just a little bit wider. The 180 macro, I mentioned in the first program that I sometimes take it out of mothballs. It's not a lens I regularly travel with, and I only use it occasionally, usually when I go out with Denise. And here we have a standard, this was in Chicago at a Canon workshop, purple coneflower, standard macro shot looking straight down with my nice Birds Art out of focus green background. And a captive baby corn snake. Everyone should recognize the background as the wall of the Holiday Inn down at Little Estero Lagoon. A lady's neighbor was going to kill this thing with a shovel. So she grabbed the snake and brought it on the IPT, and we photographed it, and she took it home to her development and released it. It's not often you get to photograph a hummingbird with a 180 macro lens. I was doing yet another Canon program down in Texas, in the Rio Grande Valley, and this little old man walked up to me and he said, is this picture any good? And he showed me a picture just like that. And I said, yeah, that's pretty good. What lens did you use? And he said, this lens. So I said, where is that bird? He said, it's nesting in my front yard. And I said, can I be at your front yard tomorrow morning at 7 a.m.? And he said, yes. So that was quite a wonderful experience. Then a similar one, different bird. This is in Ecuador at a wonderful place called Guango. And we're using a 6-flash setup. And here's Linda Robbins' guide. If you're interested in this stuff, it's $50, but she knows how to do it with the 6-7 flash setups to get sharp with the lighting in the background. And if there's too many hummingbirds, we would take a feeder down. And then if there were not enough hummingbirds, if there were too many hummingbirds, we'd put a feeder up. If there were not enough, we'd take one feeder down. And I noticed that the rufous-breasted cornets would stay on the feeder when I was holding it. So I just took one and I put it on the railing, and then I got a chair and I pulled up my chair, 10 inches away, put the teleconverter on, figured out the flash, and it took me about an hour to get the image that I wanted with the 180 macro and the teleconverter. But it's a free and wild bird, no setup, nothing. He's not tied down or anything. Also in Panama at Canopy Lodge, my friend Raul Arias de Palma has herps wranglers. They go out and they catch frogs and snakes for us at night, bring them back, we photograph them, and then they take them and release them in the wild. 180 macro. And the lemur frog. Nice complementary background with a eucalyptus tree, and they get the name lemur frog not from the eyes but from the way that they crawl up the tree. Too cool. Standard use of the 180 macro, and here's a tip for improving your flower photographs. Shade the subject. 99% of flower images made in the sun would be better if you just held a cardboard up or shaded it with your body. Just flowers don't need a lot of contrast. And then the exception to the rule, a brilliantly lit water lily, just with the natural shaded background in the tea-colored water, and then underexposing for the whites renders the water even blacker than it looked to the eye. Was taking out the garbage one morning and there was a southern toad on my front little pad, so I grabbed them and put them in a box, caught some crickets, threw a little dish of water and some moist leaves in there, and then at 4 o'clock I took them out, found a nice log, put it on top of my Toyota Sequoia, and made lots of pictures. Southern toad. The old 70-200. First I heard of it, they said, oh man, if you're going to Homer, you need a 70-200. And I bought it and used it with great success on my first trip to Galapagos. So this was the 70-200 f2.8 IS lens, still image stabilized. They make a non-IS that I think is still in production. And then they make the newer one we'll see in a minute. So I used it quite a bit here on a tripod after dark. And this Galapagos sea lion was so young that it was trying to get milk from the mother's ear. Too cute. Another huge tip for people using intermediate telephotos as their long lens. Get your butt on the ground. This was a tame animal. If I had stood and photographed it pointing down at 45 degrees, the picture would have no intimacy, and all that, you'd see all the sharp leaves right behind it. It would be downright ugly. But by getting low, I effectively move the background farther away. If I am shooting this and I'm shooting down, I'm going to see all the texture in the table. But if I get right to the level of the table, then the background is going to be the wall at least 2 feet away or 20 feet away. So getting low and throwing the background effectively out of focus by moving it farther from the subject is a great tip for the short lenses. And then at f2.8, if you have a beautiful granddaughter who does ballet, you bring it, use a high ISO. Hi, Maya. Maya wants to be a rock star. Then the 70-200 f4. Where did we see that? Something during the break, we ran across the 70-200 f4. B&H has 1 million specials on it right now. It's a great lens. I used it for about 5 years. I said, geez, why should I carry around the f2.8 lens when this f4 lens is so much lighter? It's super sharp. I use it with a 1.4 teleconverter all the time. And I think you can get the thing for under $1,000 now. Crazy, new. At St. Augustine Alligator Farm, with a 50D or a 40D at Little Estero Lagoon. And on my Iceland trip, I was still using the 70-200 f4 here with the teleconverter, and this bird was on this beautiful little patch of grass on the edge of the cliff. And then I remember I wanted to get a head portrait. only I had a group of like 7 people, and I'm going like, oh my God. And it was on such a nice perch. So after everybody got the shot, I said, I'm going to go in really slowly and see if I can get a head portrait. And I did not want to scare the bird. So I just got low and moved very slowly and wound up with that one. I was happy. Here, they had to hold my ankles as I went over the cliff. 7200 f4 and a 7D. And here, I'm not laying on the ground, I'm standing on the level of the birds in a ditch where there's a canal, so I'm pretty much shooting at their level. The 7200 f4 was killer at Bosque with a 5D Mark III. That was the railroad pond, Bosque, looking east from the crane pools in the morning, probably at 70 millimeters. And then a great lens to have on your lap if you're in the co-pilot seat on a float plane or a bush plane. This is Kodiak Island in the foreground and the mountains in Katmai National Park where we go for bears. It doesn't always work. I've had the lens on my lap a million times, and mostly you get bupkis. 7200 f4 and the 7D again. Exposure set manually so I don't have to worry when the background changes. And I'm tracking this bird, and all of a sudden the biggest wave I've ever seen there comes in crazy. Cliffs are like 80 feet high, and this wave breaks right against them, adding to the photograph. And in the Galapagos, I should mention, we have a few openings on my trip. I do lead the best Galapagos trip in the world. Leaving July 2nd from Quito, leaving to June 30th. Anybody's interested, and I need to get more people on the boat. It's a 2-week trip, the world's best guide. Shoot us an email. 70 to 200 alone, dark morph red-footed booby with a chick. And then I finally succumbed. My friend Patrick Sparkman, who you'll see in the last slide of the program, he's telling me that he's using the 70. Oh, he brought the 70 to 200 282 to Galapagos, and he had it with the 2X. And I had the 400 DO for flight. So he was using it for flight and general purpose. And a little warbler finch, a tiny little bird, landed like this close. So with my 400 DO, I was dead. Minimum focus is like 12 feet. And Patrick just went and showed me a beautiful full frame picture. So I said, geez, I got to get me one of them. So it's the 7200 IS2, the new model, still heavy, still f2.8. This is just with a 1.4 teleconverter on Hood Island in the Galapagos, battling teenage mockingbirds. At midway, pointing down at about f16 at the feet of a Laysan albatross. And then crazy stuff, crazy, all about knowing your gear. I put on the 2X teleconverter on the 7200 2.8, and I put on 3 extension tubes, but I couldn't get as close as I want to fill the frame like that. So the trick is, this is just one 12 millimeter tube. Normally, when you want to have autofocus, you put the teleconverter on the lens and then 1 or 2 extension tubes behind the lens, and you'll get autofocus. And of course, you'll want to stop down to prevent vignetting. The professional trick is, if you're willing to focus manually, you take 1 or more extension tubes and you put them on the lens, and you put the teleconverter behind them. And generally, you can get about 2 to 3 feet closer. So I had the 7200 2.8, 3 extension tubes, the 2X teleconverter, and again, as Denise described in the first program, laying on the ground so I can hold it absolutely still, and then focusing manually, and then making the picture of the face of a red-billed tropic bird. My grandson Sam, there's the 7200 f4, lightweight for a little 12-year-old kid, never photographed before. And notice that the tortoise is yawning when I took this picture. Sam made this picture at a 30th of a second. So he has excellent sharpness techniques. He's resting his butt on the ground. Please, us older folks, do not try this advanced sharpness technique. If I did that, it'd be right to the hospital or else they'd need a crane to get me up. But for Sam, it was a piece of cake. Now, Sam was quite skilled from the first time he pressed the shutter button. We found this short-eared owl at the top of Prince Philip Steps. My friend Peter Kess found it. Said, okay, everybody's going to have 2 minutes with the bird. God's honest truth, 12-year-old Sam made the best picture of anyone in the group, and he did that many times. We circled around this one penguin posing in the Panga, Zodiac, for 20 minutes. Sam made the best photograph of anyone in the group. Uncanny. 70-200 2.8 on our trip to, thank you, I love this one. And the big debate, I posted this on my blog and also on birdphotographers.net, and the big debate was leave the tree or take it. So I like it a little better with the tree. And this is, Mammoth Hot Springs? Beautiful place, amazing, early morning. Then we had this dust bathing buffalo. This is with the 70-200 and the 1.4. And most of the pictures in this situation we threw away because we were so excited that he was furiously dust bathing that in 95% of the pictures you couldn't see the buffalo. You just saw a big brown cloud. White Dome Geyser with the 70-200 as a landscape lens, incredibly sharp. In the Galapagos for flight, swallow-tailed gull. At Bosque, so the same uses for the lens. Here I am in San Diego using flash and intentionally overexposing the rock in the foreground while lining up with the pink sky in background to give this a sort of a pelican and peach heaven look. I had hoped this would do something in a contest, never did. And then because of popular demand, I tried the 70-200 2.8, the 2x teleconverter, and a 7D. Of course, with the 7D having a smaller battery, even with 2 batteries in there, it doesn't drive the lenses quickly, but it's quick enough to make some nice, sharp photographs. So it is a viable combination. And in Homer with the 1D4 and a 1.4 teleconverter, deadly, deadly. With the 2x teleconverter in Svalbard, Svalbard caribou. And then this year, if you went to the blog about 2 weeks ago, you saw a series of images where I took the 70-200, wherever it went, over here, with the 5D3, with the 2x teleconverter, with the 2x, and a warming polarizer on the front set to dark, and used it as my blast-off lens. Because remember I said I wanted that extra reach, so the 2x will get me out to 400 full frame, and this was my favorite in a series. This is at 1/13 of a second. And then, believe it or not, 70-200 with the 2x. This is with the 1DX, because if you want to use it for flight, it's not a bad idea to have a pro body because the bigger battery will drive AF faster. So this is the 70-200, the 1DX, and the 2X, just on Bosque backlit. And this is an earlier one with the 1D Mark IV. So yes, the 70-200 with the 2X is viable for flight photography, despite all the internet experts telling you it's no good. The 15 Fisheye. I think it's a rarity now. I think it's discontinued, but for the 8-15, but it's a great lens. I still keep it because I don't own the 8-15. I like the Fisheye better. I mean, I should own the 8-15 for when I need it. Lake Kissimmee in pre-dawn. The Galapagos Morning Glory. And this was a 3-frame HDR with a little touch of grunge. And skimmers, and again you have the earth shadow, the pink, blue, purple. And literally I'm about 2 feet from the bird. So I got on my hands and knees and crawled up to get close to the flock. Notice if I point up, we get the concave look. And if we point it up, we get the convex look. See, I knew that one after y'all helped me. But this is from the tower at Bonaventure. But what people don't realize with a 15 fisheye is that if you put the horizon right in the middle and you keep the lens level, the horizon comes out perfectly straight. Of course, the trick here was to wait for a nice gannet to fly by pretty close to the rule of thirds position. I mentioned I have a great guide. The rule in the Galapagos is the 7-foot rule, but here Juan gave me special dispensation to do the 7-inch rule. And I happened to be out on the afternoon of Hurricane Irene on Long Island, had the fisheye. If you'd been there 2 weeks before, there's all vegetation and nesting beach birds. Fortunately, it was the end of the season, but it was certainly a dramatic scene. The 400 DO. DO stands for diffractive optical. They put an E on the end, diffractive optical elements. They decided to make this lens without glass elements. They would use composite elements from some kind of minerals, and that they would make the lens cheaper and much lighter. Well, they got the lighter part right. The cheaper part they sort of skipped over. When the lens came out, it was about $7 grand. I think it's gone down a little bit in price. But I used that for years. It's great. Forget this kid's name. Really good photographer. We featured him in the blog. He's from Texas. And the 400 DO was his big lens for the Galapagos trip. That's when I used to use it in Galapagos. Striated heron. Great hummingbird lens. Perched hummingbird with a 1.4 teleconverter at Tandayapa. The day before we leave for the Galapagos, we get in a van and we go to Tandayapa to photograph the perched hummingbirds. And killer lens for flight, 400 DO, either on land or from the zodiacs. Swallow-tailed gull. With a 40D, oh man, I got to go back to this place. It's a private island. I think it's in Northern Ireland. I forget the name. I have all the information on it, but I need to lead a trip back there. Incredible. So I decided to go light with the 40D and the 400 DO.
Would you be shooting wide open, or would you stop down a little?
I'm not a big fan of stopping down ever. When you're really close to the bird is when you want to stop down. Like you have a songbird and you're at 18 feet with a big lens, that's where you need to stop down. For 28 years, I've been focusing on the bird's eye and shooting wide open, and it generally works. This is probably maybe stop down a little bit, 1 2/3, 7/1 or something. Same trick as before. 400 DO, it's got a tiny flower center, a 1/2 inch across. How the heck do you do that? Stack teleconverters with 2 extension tubes in front and focus manually. Stack the 2X and the 1.4 with a 12 tube between them, and then 50 millimeters of extension in front. So it's all about understanding your gear. You know, I can't go, this was at some garden on the Wild Britain cruise. I just can't be going on shore with 42 lenses. I don't have an assistant. So I take my extension tubes and my teleconverters, I understand how they work, and we can make them do magic. Yes, thank you. This was honored in 2 big contests in 2008. It won first prize in bird photography, the professional division in National Wildlife, and then in Nature's Best, they were so nice, they named the category for me. It was called Art in Nature. And this was first prize there also. And when the guy printed this, when we made this into a big canvas print, he cloned out the little falling leaf. He thought it was a defect. I said, no, you got to do it again. And again, great for flight. for flight with a teleconverter. And one year I bought the 800, and then I brought the 400 DO as the lens to be on my shoulder. And even point blank, the bear's walking right by us, me sitting on the ground, say hi for me. And when I used to do the Hummingbird setups with 6 flashes, the 400 DO was amazingly fast focus. I got more sharp ones than with any other lens that I ever used. And again, in places, I had a guy in Boston once, I did a seminar, and he came up to me and he said, I just had my 5th hernia operation. I want a big lens, but I can't carry 8 pounds. I said 400 DO. That was 12 years ago. The guy sends me a Christmas card every year. So if you're challenged for weight, even though it's expensive, the 400 DO can be a godsend. And it's well lighter than the 300 2.8, even the newer version. So again, we went to Midway, and it's a big to-do about weight. You can only get on the plane with 80 pounds, which is like my underwear and my insulin. So cut down as light as you can go. 400 DO was great, white turns. No Nikon equivalent, no. Nikon, you know, you're pretty much going to look at the 200 to 400, but that one's really heavy.
Yeah.
Here's the 400 DO using a technique called flash as main light. What that simply means is if the flash doesn't go off, the picture comes out black. The flash is lighting everything. And so I was shooting at a 250th f/13 in the dark as this great egret was grabbing Mama's face to get fed at Gatorland. 400 DO on a teleconverter, my lucky day. Why? The Raven had a rabbit's foot in its mouth. And then, I said it in the first program, I'll say it again. When the 800 was first announced and available, probably October 3 years ago, I said, that's a stupid lens. Why would you want an 800 5.6 when you could have a 600 f4 with a 1.4 teleconverter and have more versatility? Then I made the mistake of borrowing the 800. Some of the things I found out is that it focuses way faster than a 600 with a teleconverter, even though it's at the same aperture. And that because it had new coatings on the glass, that focus acquisition was much faster and focusing accuracy was much better. So I borrowed one for Bosque, and then I immediately went home and bought one and admitted to the world that I was the stupid one. And now we'll talk about what happens now that they have the 600 too. That'll be the last slide of the program. So there I was at Bosque the first year, seeing how wonderfully this thing focused with the 1D4. At Morro Bay, great 800 with a 1.4 teleconverter. This one is titled Dead Gull Fights Back. This was honored in National Wildlife Competition. Long-billed curlews battling at sunset with a little, now this is fill flash, where if the flash doesn't go off, the picture's going to look pretty similar, just without the little catch light in the bird's eye and with the feathers not being quite as sharp. So fill flash, you reduce the flash, and if the flash doesn't go off, then the picture's still going to look pretty much the same because you've set the right exposure as if you weren't using flash. With flash as main light, if the flash doesn't go off, the picture's going to be 5 stops underexposed. You're depending on the flash to light the photograph.
Are these with the better beamer also? I saw that.
Whenever I'm using telephoto flash, I'm using a better beamer because to not use it is just being lazy and throwing away battery power. Especially now since I switched from rechargeables to lithium ultimate energizers. I think some kind of combination of those 3 things. And they last forever. The other ones need to be recharged so often. 30th of a second with the 800. When I started using slow shutter speeds, I started to realize that the 4-stop image stabilizer on the new 800 when it was new was really way better than the supposedly 3-stop image stabilizer. So now the 500, the new 500, that's lightweight, we didn't talk about that yet. This one has the 4-stop IS. The 300-28 has the 4-stop IS. And by the way, after the program, everybody's invited to come up and grab a hold of the lenses and check the weights and stuff, or play with the 800 on the Mongoose. And again, this was with the 1D4, 800, teleconverter, get down low and get a beautiful head portrait of a Ross's goose. Out on the beach in October, this one was honored in Nature's Best Sanderlings with 2 Dunlin. 1, 2. Up in Alaska, big pink salmon. We have 1 opening on our Alaska trip for fishing bears coming up in September of 13. Look at that cute smiley bear. 800 from the boat on a tripod, 7 vertical frames on a foggy morning, stitched panorama. File, automate, photo merge, boom, puts them together perfectly. And the 800 killer for isolating your subject against a sweet background on South Plaza Island, prickly pear cactus. My friend James Shadle, my co-founding partner of birdphotographers.net, he takes folks out on a pontoon boat to Alafaya Banks in Tampa Bay for spoonbills. This is a baby photographed on July 3rd. And then with patience and just standing still, it walked right up to us for a head portrait. $800, 1D4, and teleconverter on a blub, the big lens beanbag that I invented, had manufactured for big lenses from the vehicle. And a painted bunting again, 800, and here is where you need to stop down. Big lenses close to minimum focusing distance, f11, f13. The danger if you're shooting at f8 and you focus on the side of the bird, you're going to be way short of the eye. So another professional trick which I did here was focus halfway up the back, so that by focusing here, I'm on the same plane as the bird's eye. If you focus here, you're close to ½ an inch too close and you're going to get a soft eye. I know that from personal experience. From the top of Canopy Tower, so amazing magnification. Thankfully, amazing magnification. And same subject, a couple of hours later, the hump and the rump of a coastal brown bear backlit. And this is my reward for being a good son and visiting my mom on Long Island at Christmas time. West End Jones Beach. Not snow, just in the sand. Pre-dawn, 60th of a second. So again, 4-stop image stabilization and good sharpness techniques. Just 2 of the things, all the flash techniques, all the exposure stuff, and advanced sharpness techniques in the CD book that is a follow-up to the original softcover book by Amphoto that put me on the map. We actually, at one point, they quit printing these, and within 6 months, I was getting emails that people were paying as much as $675 for the hardcover version and $375 for the softcover. So I said, geez, that has to be a message for me. So I bought the rights for the book and we printed 10,000 copies. By the same company who did it, I remastered the cover, and then after whatever many months, this giant yellow freight truck came into my driveway. And if you can go back on the blog and see how many books is 10,000 books. They bought 4 pallets, about 7 feet wide, about 6 feet high, and about 6 feet deep. Then they bought 4 of them to put in my house. We've sold a little more than half of them. And my favorite macro lens, 800 with a teleconverter, maybe an extension tube. And here, for a macro lens, you needed the 800 because this beautiful lily pad in the pre-dawn light was in the middle of the pond. Nobody was getting it but me. With a teleconverter, so, you know, in short order, it became my all-time favorite telephoto lens. In Japan, from the ship, with a 1.4 teleconverter from a drifting ship, Stellar Sea Eagle. And then I learned a great lesson. Denise runs a trip or two every year to Weehawken for New York City skyline. And I was taking pictures with the 800 and the 2X. And there were 6-second exposures, and I was doing HDRs. And every picture was blurred. And I happened to say out loud, our mutual friend Scott Vincent was co-leading. And I said, damn, I don't understand it. 6 seconds, it should be sharp as a tack. Every picture's horribly blurry. And in 1 second, Scott says, turn off image stabilization. Over time, if there's the slightest breeze, it thinks that the lens is moving and it shifts the lens elements, making the lens unsharp. So I turned IS off, bingo, every picture sharp as a razor. So you got to be learning every day. This one is the 800 at a 6/40th of a second in a snowstorm. White-fronted geese and snow geese at Klamath. We talked about it a little bit in the first program. And when I put this on the blog, I said, who would keep this, who would delete it? So about half the people voted to delete it, but I already knew that it was going to be highly honored in the BBC contest. So that was fun. Okay, that's me. That's the new 500. It's a pound and close to 2 pounds lighter than the old 500, and it's supposed to be easily hand-holdable by everyone. So I went out that day and I hand-held it with the 1.4 teleconverter, and I just took it and went for a walk, and I photographed for about 4 hours, and I got great pictures. You'll see a couple of them in the next minute, and trust me, the next morning my left arm was very sore. So I'm sure if I practiced hand-holding, the 500 would be imminently hand-holdable, but it's not like everybody can do it and it's a piece of cake. It still weighs 7 pounds or something. So the funny part is there was this guy out there with a Nikon 70-200. At the end of the day, I said, hey, would you mind taking a few pictures of me and you can maybe email them to me? I want to get a picture, because I was really feeling mellow and stuff. So he took a whole bunch of pictures and he kept showing them to me, and I said, great, 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 do some more. So then when he emailed me his 5 favorites, I said, well, his name, oh geez, Brian Kimmler or something. I said, hey Brian, those are really good, but do you think you might have a picture where I look a little less dorky? So he sent me 5 more, and there was one where I had a pretty serene look on my face. So that was at the end of the morning, and I was down laying in the mud and the sand on the lens and sand everywhere. Who cares? That was one of the first ones I made, a little bit wide in the frame with the marsh in the background. Then I walked up to this young yellow-crowned night heron, holding the camera vertically, again at 700, using rear focus and trying to keep the lens still. And then right before he took a picture of me using the lens for flight. Then when I went up on the bears, I said, geez, the 800 is often too long for a single bear. Much better to have the 800, you got the 800 and then you got 1120. Much better to have 500, 700, and 1,000. So I went up, and I love this one. And when the birds come close. When the bears come close, put the 2X on and do the fur patterns. This is the 500 alone, beautiful symmetry of a clamming bear. And with the 1.4 teleconverter, believe me, if you've been on the blog, you've seen some of the pictures of me and the bear 3 feet away. So they come to us, they're always full, so we don't worry about getting eaten. You got to learn to think quickly on your feet with digital. Here I am, I got the 500 and the 1.4, and I can't back up into the water because there's bears on the other side of the creek. So I focus on the bird's face. I make a picture in manual mode. I don't touch the rear button to refocus, and I photograph his feet. File, automate, photo merge. In other words, it's a horizontal stitch panorama, and I do that often when I can't fit the birds or the things in the frame. This one says I cross my heart. That is a single frame. And then Clemens and I were, Clemens van der Werf, one of my top students, we were laying on our bellies in the creek, and the group was to the right of this bear, and this thing came running down the river. It was a small bear, a young bear, about 2 or 3 probably, and he came down the river going, ha, 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 ha. And there were 2 big boars laying out in the river, so he said, man, this guy better watch out who he's huffing at. So we immediately nicknamed him Mr. Huffer. So he walked by the group, and then with Clemens and I laying on the ground, he walked up within minimum focusing distance, sniffing us. Then he went around behind us, and then there was a bald eagle out in the channel where the 2 sleeping boars were. So he decided, he was a playful little thing, he decided that he was going to chase the bald eagle. Only the bald eagle was 10 feet away from this big male bear who didn't exactly like getting chased. So laying on my belly, I make this one with the 500. And that's little Mr. Huffer, and he's scared for his life, and he's running. And the God's honest truth, I watched through my lens, little Mr. Huffer ran about 2 miles to the limits of vision before the big bear came back. And over the course of the next week, every time we saw little Mr. Huffer, he would go start up with these big bears that outweighed him by 500 pounds. So the moral of the story is, in about 5 years, you don't want to be around little Mr. Huffer. He is going to be king of the beach. Nice little fight. 500, 5D Mark III and a 1.4 teleconverter with a left-hand sensor picked to get the birds out of the middle of the frame. And Condor in Chile, we had a few days. Oh, did I make a big mistake? I went out into the Andes mountain on a sunny day without sun protection, and my lips got fried for 3 weeks. And then just before we got on the plane to leave, I downloaded the new firmware, because when the 1DX first came out, it wouldn't autofocus on here with a 1.4 or on the 500 with a 2X. Then they released this firmware 1.1.1, and it autofocused, and here I was using the 500 and the 2X for this beautiful bird outside of Santiago, Chile. Thanks for coming. So we're up in Homer, and we got a whole bunch of lenses. So what do we use? This is the 600 from the car on that blub, on that big bean bag. And this is the 70-200 and the 1.4. And this up in Homer, this is a dime a dozen shot. We're feeding the eagles. They love it. You can't feed legally anymore. So we hire a boat, and we go across the bay to Kachemak Bay and feed the birds, and the birds love it. 70-200 alone and a 7D, and the 1D4 during a snowstorm. And there's a single eagle in the upper right on this beautiful cliff with a little grunge HDR thrown in single frame. And I'd have loved to have entered this in BBC, but there was a second ugly eagle up here where you just saw the white head, and I had to get rid of it, so I never entered it. Then at the 800, we're standing down below, and our boatman is standing up on a big sandbank throwing fish into the color. And then the 800 with a teleconverter on a beautiful perch. And the 800 on a tripod from the boat. And the codfish, we buy them and we set them out, or we toss out the herring for the flight photography. and then the 800 alone. We're in the boat, and here comes the sea otter strolling by. I just put my it's down there somewhere. I put my lens case on the gunnel just as a little cushion and rested the 800 on and just followed the sea otter as he swam by. Love those marks on his face, like a alluvial patterns in the sand. And my vision of a bald eagle 800 and a teleconverter with the 25 tube. And the trick with stuff like this, remember what I said, what do you need to do when you're at minimum focusing distance?
Stop now.
Stop down. So I immediately go to f16 for this at ISO 800 and focus about here. The big myth is depth of field a third in front, 2/3 behind. With big lenses close to minimum focusing distance, depth of field is 50-50. And you can go to your depth of field charts and you'll see exactly that. Now this is a real cool one. The light was soft, there was some color in the background. So I make this image by overexposing 2 1/3 stops to get the light on the bird, knowing what I'm going to do in Photoshop, which is this. Same picture. So boy, we have so much freedom if you have a creative mind in Photoshop. Now we're at Midway. Denise is very sad because we were just ready to buy tickets for Midway. We had 4 groups going out. The government had approved the trip in a bidding process. And I had 1 group going out, and Joe Van Os had 3 groups going out. And then about 2 months ago, actually when we were in the Southern Oceans, Joe got an email, sorry, budget cuts, and the trip went down the drain. So who knows if they'll ever open it again to tourism. The deadliest lens on Midway was the 70-200. One year I brought the 800 out, one the 400, but the 70-200 with or without the teleconverter was deadly. There's the 70-200, and I'm sitting, and there's an albatross runway, just like JFK. They come from the Clipper restaurant, and they come down this path, and when they get close to the beach in the morning, they start running. So it's predictable. I picked a good spot wanting to get over, I forget the name of this, it's a native plant, 3 syllables with a lot of vowels. But then sometimes you need the big lens, the 70-200 with the 1.4. So these are called Goonie birds because they're so tame, and they are ridiculously tame. And the beautiful colors of the lagoon in the background. And I was sitting right after I made that other flight shot. Almost always they're taking off. And then I happened to look up in the morning, and here's one landing, which was a rare treat. Laysan albatross. Then about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, you'd have lunch at the Clipper restaurant, and then you bring a lens to lunch. The hotter, the better. And, the tropic birds would be out displaying. It's red-tailed tropic bird, and then there's a pair displaying to each other. Just as much fun as you could have in bright sun after lunch. And we're getting some nice reflected light from the sand onto the underparts. Then one morning we had been out, we ate, we went to photograph the runway action, and most of the group had gone back, and we said, well, we'll meet at 9:30. And I looked down the beach, and I see this black and white seabird, a big one, and I'm going like, geez, what is that, a red-footed booby that got lost from Eastern Island? And it's not making sense. And I walk up to it, and it's a lost masked booby. So I immediately, after I photographed it for a while, and I sent word back by bicycle to have the group come back, got out the fisheye lens, and here I'm about 4 inches away. Nice scenic. And you can see the breaking waves as the waves break on the reef in the background. And then this is the 70-200 and the 2X. Hand holding, being nice and still, shooting at f13 or something. Masked booby. And the one year I did get out there with the 800, there's a place called Rusty Bucket where you can get the albatrosses on the nest against whatever sunset color there is. And then somebody asked if we use any flash. Whoops. Oh, did I mess up? Wrong program. Oops. Too many shows in the last 2 weeks. In the what makes a great image I did on Saturday, the next one was a flash shot of the shadowed side, with apologies. Super rare bird, short-tailed albatross. The chicks of Laysan albatross are about this big. This thing finally bred 2 years ago, and we saw the chick at about the same age, about a month, and the thing was like this big. It was monster. And this is a bird that was almost eradicated by a single volcanic eruption. All of them breed on one island in Japan, off of the coast of Japan. I forget the name. And there was a gigantic volcanic eruption right in the middle of the breeding season. Every bird was killed. In the 7 or 10 years since, it's been repopulated by the 700 young birds that were at sea. A couple of them got lost at Midway, this being one. And now there was a breeding pair there 2 years ago. But God, what a bird. Look at that. The pink and blue. Oh my God. I'd been to Antarctica in 2007. You've seen a bunch of those pictures. And then I was back with Cheeseman's on December 30th of 2012. And I did Antarctica, South Georgia, and the Falklands. And then Denise and I had the pleasure of joining Cheeseman's again on a trip that went to the Falklands and South Georgia. We did 11 days in South Georgia and 3 days in the Falklands. And these are a few from this year. So it's the 300-2.8 with the 2X for both of these. And then the 70-200 with a 1.4, a baby Gentoo penguin, and a Gentoo penguin stretching, and macaroni penguins walking down to get a bath, and a little baby Gentoo bossing his brother. And oh, I remember this morning, I had ruined two 1D4s in a pouring rainstorm. And then I put them in a pillowcase with the hairdryer on for like 5 days. And they finally came back, but I had no rear LCD. So I was sort of flying in the dark. And I remember I had the 7200 and the 1.4 on my shoulder and set the exposure manually to 1.5 off the sky, whatever, and waiting. And every time one of these guys would come in, I'd grab the lens and try to get it, and got one perfect one. And this is actually Antarctica. And this is Bailey Head, one of the amazing landings. You could see the steepness of the beach. First time I was down there, we couldn't land at all. And this is the 70-200 on a tripod with the zillion chin straps. And that is not a big boulder, that's an elephant seal. St. Andrews Bay with the 70-200. And then the 70-200 from the trip. Killer whales all around the boat. Get up to the bridge wing, hand holding the 70-200. And I think I also had the 300-2.8 with me. I think I mentioned the 24-105. Whenever I go without it, I wish I had it. Here the shot was 24-105, and I borrowed one from somebody. Now you got to be careful what you learn. This year we got to this spot and it was snowing like a bandit. And when I had gone up to this colony in January, I hiked up about half a mile and I said, well, where is it? They said it's at the top of the climb. Oh no, you have to climb up another quarter mile there. And this is through this horrible tussock grass. And then I climbed up with all my gear. And I said, where is it? And they said, oh, you have to climb up another 2/3 of a mile. And then I climbed and I climbed, and it took me like an hour and change. And I get there and I go, where's the macaroni penguin colony? And they go, down there. So I climbed all the way down, and it was really hard to get close to the bird, so I was disappointed. But I did borrow 24-105. So when it came to this year, and we got there, and it was snowing, I said, I'm not going, I'm not making that climb all the way up and all the way down. So Denise went and all my friends went, and I got a great blog post out of it called, "You Snooze, You Lose." What happened was they went out, they made the first little climb, and all the macaroni penguins were sitting in the snow, playing and kissing and copulating. And if you go back on the blog, you could see the "You Snooze, You Lose" post, and I got all my friends to rub it in by sending me their best pictures. And they were spectacular. Macaroni penguins in the snow, and I got nothing but rest. Fisheye, I had a great roommate. This is, I really misspoke because these are pictures from the January trip, not from this year's trip. And I had a roommate, Pablo Fernicola. He wasn't as good looking or as much fun as having Denise as my roommate. But one day he came screaming, "You got to get your fisheye lens, come out with your fisheye lens." And there was this amazing cloud. And then playing in the zodiacs with the circle lens. And then amazingly, here's all this wildlife and all these penguins. And my favorite lens is of an iceberg with the 16 to 35. We had been drifting around in the brash ice all day, and it was cloudy. And as beautiful as the ice is, without sun, it's a little bit on the boring side. So the sun came out, and my friend Tom Murphy was driving the Zodiac. And I said, "Tom, could you slowly motor over towards that iceberg?" And I got in the front of the Zodiac with the 16 to 35. I set the exposure manually at a 500th at f13. I picked the focusing sensor down on the bottom. And as he was driving the boat, I was just checking the horizon and just firing away. And this was my favorite image, both of the series and of the trip. We're in Japan in winter. We're going back in 2014. The 300-28, there's the situation. This was a crappy boat. We went on the 75, which was much better for photography. And I think that's a repeat. No, you saw the one with the soft light. You saw that one. Anyway, apologies again. Tons of great flight photography in the early morning. And then you think of, if you're going to do a birdscape with Russia in the background and the pink light, that you're thinking 70 to 200. This is a birdscape with the 800 lens in the early morning light. And then imagine the boat's moving. And I see this juxtaposition coming. And I focus on this bird on the right. And then just as the boat drifts by and that bird's in the back in the perfect position, I make one image. 70 to 200, moving all the way to the back of the parking lot. This is at Tsuri Ito Crane Sanctuary. Oh my God. Too much fun. And then this one was just honored in Nature's Best in endangered species category. This is the 800, and the 1.4 and the 1.4 teleconverter. Same combination. This one is playing with the leaf, dancing away, and 300 f4 flying right by me. So a bunch of lenses and a young crane flying by. This is at ACAN Crane Center. And then just incorporating a diagonal with the 800 lens and a preening bird. Just beautiful, beautiful creatures. Now we finally get to this year. This is the trip that Denise and I did. So started out at Fortuna Bay, incredible, getting on the ground with the 24 to 105, and then getting on the ground with the 500. And at a different spot, I saw this image as soon as I got off the Zodiac, but there were people walking out there. I said, geez, right before we leave, when everybody's back at the Zodiac, I'll make the picture 70 to 200 on a tripod. And geez, I ruined it by having these in the wrong order, with apologies. What happened when we were at Fortuna Bay, had this great morning. Denise went out to the colony. I was mellow. It took me 5 hours to get out to the colony. I had the 500 with the 2X. I was photographing. I was laying down in the snow. I think you'll see a couple of more pictures. It was spectacular. I was not in my usual rush. I was walking on flat green grass, walking, taking in my surroundings. I didn't see a little rock. My right toe hit it. I pitched forward with the 500 on the tripod with the 1DX, $18,000, and this is the third day of the trip. Totaled the 1DX and totaled the 500. However, I visit a website called The Work. If you come to my blog, you've seen it for thework.com. It's the work of Byron Katie. It's very Buddhist. She teaches you to love what is. So when I fell down, I said, hey, I'm not hurt. And the last thing I did before I walked out the door for this trip was I took the 70-200, I took this lens, and I took it out of my rolling bag over here, and I put it in some wool hats in the back pocket of my extra hand vest by Vested Interest, and I put the 300-2.8 into the rolling bag along with the 500. And my reasoning was, hey, if anybody smashes a big lens, the 300-2.8 and a 2X, I've already proven it, it's a great long lens for Antarctica. So it was a great plan. I wasn't supposed to be the one to smash the lens, but I did, and the 300-2.8 became my savior on that trip. This is 300-2.8 and the 2X. This is 300 alone, gray-headed albatross up on El Sahul, our first landing. 300 and the 1.4 on a tripod. And here's another example of thinking on your feet. Make this picture and then love that flipper, being in manual exposure, setting the focus with rear focus and not refocusing, and then taking the second shot and file automate photo merge. And okay. Most of you here have focus tied to the shutter button. So when you're in AI servo and you want to take a picture of a flying bird, you're pushing the shutter button and following the bird and it's tracking. And then if the bird is sitting there and you want to recompose and you want to get the bird in the corner, you have to reach up and go to one-shot autofocus, push the button to focus, keep the button pressed halfway down and then recompose to make the picture. Years ago I tried, well 10 years ago I tried to use this thing called rear focus. I would go back and forth, and then about 5 years ago I finally said I'm doing rear focus all the time, I'm never switching back. I have my camera set up. You can do it with any Canon or Nikon camera. I leave it in AI servo all the time. If I want to focus on that little fire alarm thing back there, I frame the shot, I push this button, and again you have a choice of which button you want to use. I push the button. Even though I'm in servo, it focuses on that, and as long as I don't push the button again, I could point anywhere, it's not going to focus, and it's not going to focus when I press the shutter button. So now I can put that thing in the corner of the frame, take the picture. If that fire alarm suddenly decides to fly off the wall, I just push and hold the button to track. So the beauty for me is that I never have to go and change from AI servo to one shot. And that bogus thing that they have on some of the cameras, AI focus, it's bogus. It doesn't work the way it's supposed to. So we have a free tutorial online for rear focus, and then if you have a 1D Mark IV and a 1D, a 5, geez, so many, a 1D3, a 1D Mark IV, a 5D3, and the 1DX, we have camera guides for all of them that tell you how I set up my camera, but the rear focus tutorial is free. And if you search really good, it tells you how to set it up for a 7D and a 50D. Anyway, this was before I wrecked the camera, laying down in the snow. And then, so when I smashed the 500 1 hour after this, I said, you watch, this is the best thing that can happen, and I can prove it. How did I prove it? It happened. So I might as well love it. If you want to be in a tiff and go, oh my God, I just ruined the entire 3-week trip that I paid $32,000 for, I want to kill myself, then you're going to be a miserable SOB, and you're not going to have any fun. Instead, I said, hey, I don't have to carry the 500, the 300's lighter, I'm going to make great pictures. It focuses closer, so I can do even better with the 300 and the 2X, and I had a great trip, and I tried not to fall again. Here I again, 300. If I had the 500 that morning and not the 300, I can't make this picture, because I can't focus close enough. Yes, sir?
Was that lens insured? Was that lens lens insured?
Not only was the lens insured, but as a Canon Explorer of Light, I get free repairs for life. That's the good news. The bad news is that of all the Canon Explorers over the past 18 years, every single year I have the highest repair bill. And don't think they don't let me know about it. From the ship, the 300-2.8 was amazing for hand holding with the 1.4 teleconverter. And then here I am with the 300 and the 1. Actually, this is the 70-200 and the 2X. We were at this crappy place. It's like a tourist stop where they have the old whaling centers. And we're just about to go back to the ship. And here's these 4 Gen 2 penguins in the snow. Oh my God. But as often happens, I was so happy to get the tight close-ups. And then I said, geez, you know, the 24-105 really tells the whole story. And this is the one I mentioned. This is HDR Vivid, 5D Mark III in camera. And the amazing part is there was sun on some of the mountains. So I assumed I would throw the picture away. But the in-camera HDR did such a great job. We donated 3 pictures to the South Georgia Rat Eradication Fund. So they had an auction. It was great fun. This guy, Joe Kaplan, did it. And he got $750 for this one. Phew. Now we're at Bosque. We just got back 6 days ago. 70-200 handheld. 500 alone. I borrowed an old 5 because my 500 was in the shop. This is that scene with the birds coming over the ridge. 70-200. Some nice color. Cranes in flight. I just did a blog post 2 days ago on the 800 and the 1DX. And the title of the blog post was, "The Lethal 1DX. Is it unfair to flying cranes?" Because I made so many sharp, and this one is at a 60th of a second. I've matched the pan perfectly, so I have a sharp eye with the beautiful blur. But I made so many sharp crane pictures with good wing positions that I deleted half of them just so I wouldn't have to process them. I mean, really is incredibly better autofocus, surer and more accurate than the 1D4. And the 5D3 is right up there. It just doesn't have the battery power or the frame rate, but it's amazingly accurate autofocus. 800 alone with the 1DX. 70-200, 2X, and that warming polarizer set to dark, a 13th of a second. This was the birds coming into the crane pool in the morning. And then 800, 1.4, 1DX, and the problem here was there were 25,000 birds in the pool. So even the close ones, I'm just standing still, hoping nobody comes by me, and waiting for one to float into a little bit of clean water. And
I'm sorry, November?
This is Bosque 2 weeks ago, yeah. 70-200 at my favorite sunset spot at the north end of the refuge. Look at that over there. That's what it looked like. Sandhill crane landing. And the last slide in the program of pictures, I mentioned Patrick Sparkman, who inspired me for the 70-200 2.8. He purchased the 600-2, the new version, much lighter. The new 600-2 weighs as much as the old 500. So he said to me 2 days after using it, God, he's younger and stronger than me. So he can easily handhold a 600. And there's a whole flock of guys on birdphotographers.net who were hand-holding the old 600. Now they all have the new 600, Doug Brown, Arash Hazegi, and they're young and skilled. And when you can hand-hold these big telephoto lenses, you have way more freedom. It's way easy to track the birds. It's way easy to get on the ground and get in position. It's way better. I can barely handhold the 500, so I will not be hand-holding the 600. I actually ordered a 600, bought it, had it in the box, and decided I love my 800. This was right before they announced that 1.1 firmware. Then as soon as they announced it, I sold the 600. I'll probably wind up with one just for the heck of it, but right now I sold it. Patrick is loving it. This is a guy named Tim something. His wife is Barbara. He drives a Cadillac custom-built motorhome. and he tows an Escalade, and he has this cabinet that costs $8 grand with 2 of each Nikon lens. And at the top, at the very top, you could see there's some clamps. He had 2 300 2.8s, 2 400 2.8s, and 2 600s for him and his wife. Beautiful people. They go around the country in their motorhome doing slide programs for free for old age homes and hospitals. God bless him. So that's how he keeps his lenses. Then there's the professional way of storing your lenses. So the next one, as you might guess, is my trunk. So, anal retentive and lifelong slobbo. So, thanks to Stephen and Glima and everybody at Canon. They are so wonderfully generous, and that's one place where Canon does outdo Nikon. I have no problem. Nikon, 2 of my best friends shoot Nikon, but in their generosity to professionals, Nikon throws around nickels like they were manhole covers. Canon is amazingly supportive. God bless them. If you will be around the west coast of Florida, where a lot of people hang out in winter to do bird photography, Denise and I are doing 2 full days. We just did one in Staten Island last week, and we're doing a reprise at Tampa. To come visit me, I don't have business cards. Birds is Art. I have a bunch of flyers left for those who'd like them, can come up and grab one. And again, once you get to the blog, everything is interlinked. From the blog, you can go to the website. From the website, you can go to the blog. I urge you, if you enjoyed today's program, to subscribe to the blog and subscribe to the bulletins. You'll see a link across the top, Birds is Art Bulletins, recent bulletins. Click on that. Tons of free information, every picture with the legendary captions, information on our Birds is Art instructional photo tours. We have an online store where we teach you how to use the stuff you buy. We compete with B&H a little bit. We do match their prices where we sell the same stuff. On the other hand, they sell cameras I don't, so I'm a B&H affiliate. Denise is a B&H affiliate. If you're gonna make a purchase, we beg you, if you hang out at the blog, you start hanging out and learning stuff, to use either Denise's links or my links when you make your purchases, and we get a very small percentage. And in the past 2 years, I've done the people thanking me for the work we do at the blog, which I'm out of my mind, and so is Denise, where I'll often be spending 40 to 50 hours a week writing blog posts and the bulletins. But for me in particular, in the past 2 years, we've done $120 million of sales for B&H. So thank you all who've been doing that. And I'm gonna actually leave this up for a sec. So I'm going out there. I got my extra hand vest on. Sometimes I'll have the 300 2.8 in the back. I'll have the 24 to 105. I'll have the fisheye. I'll have some water. I have some sugar candy. I'm diabetic, so I need to have glucose tablets in case I get low. I have my 2 sets of teleconverters in here with extension tubes. I have the 24 to 105 in here. And then with this Black Rapid strap, I'll usually, and the tip I give with the Black Rapid is, yes, if you never tighten this thing, over time it's gonna come loose and you're gonna drop your lens. But, so every time you pick it up, just give it a little twist to snug it. I'm carrying this here. The camera's on. You can actually set up, if I'm in action, I'm gonna be like this. If I'm walking a long distance, I take the strap and I pull it over to my shoulder so it's not yanking on my neck. And there's ways to do it with both the 1D4 and the 1DX and the 5D3 where you can lock your settings. Or else if you're in AV mode, say at +1/3, and then you walk 500 yards and you see a beautiful turn fly by and the exposure's right, and you take a picture and you see you're at f32 at a 15th of a second, because this thing goes. This thing rubs against your body, but there are ways to lock it. And those are all covered in our guide. And then I will have usually the 800 on my shoulder and a couple of tips on the tripods. For 17 years, I went out and I was using heavier gear, and I carried the tripod like this, and I carried the lens like this. There's pictures of people walking on the beach like this. And really what I was doing was wrecking my right shoulder because this is a stress position for the rotator cuff and all the muscles in your shoulder. So after 20 years, and just when I just did that, my shoulder's still tender. I swim every day. So for the last 8 years, it's been a constant battle of doing isolated active stretching and active release technique. And I've done prolotherapy injections, and I do ice baths to reduce inflammation, and it's still chronic. But the trick is, best is to take the lens off and carry it on your shoulder on the strap. Barring that, there's a lot of times you need to be ready for action now. You don't want to have to put the lens on the tripod. So what I came up with, and it's why I hate tripods with center posts, I pull this leg through. And now I can walk and pretty much get the thing in the neutral position, get my arm much closer to neutral. And we actually have a couple of minutes for questions. And again, sharpness techniques, all the stuff on flash, and everything I learned about bird photography from 1998 to 2006, 4 years in the writing, 4 different forwards over the 4 years, 960 pages, and 916 pages, 900 photographs. And this is the one that put me on the map, The Art of Bird Photography. It was based on film, and this is 40. This is the one I have got 10,000 in my backyard. The CD book, we ordered 10,000 of them. They're 40 each. We sell them as a package for 70, and I'd be glad to sign the soft cover. Yes, sir.
With budgetary constraints, not everyone can have the equipment that I envy you have. If I were to pick one lens, 400 millimeter or 600 millimeter, given 1.4, 1.7, 2.0,
You talking Canon or Nikon? Sounds like Nikon because you mentioned 1.7.
Right, Nikon.
Yeah, it depends. You know, I'll give you the right answer, but you have to make the decision. I mean,
You know, autofocus, sharpness.
Yeah.
That.
My question is, what's your budget? Are you going to buy one big lens that you're going to use for your whole life, or you need to look for something inexpensive?
No, 10,000 to 20,000.
Yeah, piece of cake. I mean, you have a choice of 3 lenses. The new 200 to 400 VR, the version 2, and that would be if you do a lot of things like bears and Galapagos and Antarctica, da-da-da. And then if you say, no, I do mostly birds and I need reach, then you're down to 2 lenses. Thanks for coming. You're down to the 500 f4 VR or the 600 f4 VR. And the short way that I like to say that is the 600 lenses, and I'd almost say this even with the new lighter 600 II. The 600 lenses are for people who are young, strong, and dumb, because you got to carry it.
Monopods, you don't use them?
When I first started photographing, there was a kid from Baltimore named Middleton Evans. His parents were really rich and he did a lot of vanity publishing, but he was a good photographer. And I saw him make sharp pictures with a monopod at a 15th of a second without VR. To me, that's inconceivable. To me, making a sharp picture, I mean, I can't envision using a monopod for what I do, and yet, you know, professional sports photographers use them every day. So I'm the wrong person to ask. But you almost, you know, with the new lightweight Canon lenses, you either see people hand holding or using a real tripod. Question? Yes, sir.
Image stabilization and use of a tripod.
Denise and I both keep image stabilization on all the time on tripods and not. With all the older lenses, I left image stabilizer mode 2 on 100% of the time. With the newer lenses, they threw a little monkey wrench in there with 3 IS modes. And what I was actually doing in South Georgia, because if you IS mode 2 is supposed to be for flight, or IS mode 3, I forget which one, and you follow it, but it doesn't engage till you push the button. And that doesn't work for me because I'm seeing the thing shake, and it gives me comfort to see it stable as I'm framing it. But what I was actually doing even for flight, and Canon would tell you this is wrong, don't do it, is leaving IS mode 1 on for flight and action. And I was hand holding the 300 with the 2X, both for flight and especially for general shooting and getting super sharp stuff. So that, you know, I turned out to be right about smashing my 500 too. It turned out to be a great thing. And now, yes, sir.
How many of these lenses do you actually take with you on a trip?
All of them.
No,
Yes, all of them.
that is not true.
We saw the back of your car.
Back today, he threatens to not bring them all.
If you're going on a plane.
If I'm going on a plane, I have choices. I use the big think tank bag, the biggest one. It's technically slightly too big for some international thing. It's the airports. I get them mixed up if it's the airport security or the airport international. But I bring that bag, the one over there, and God's honest truth, I can easily get in there the 800, the 300 2.8, the 70 to 200, all my extension tubes, 2 or 3 camera bodies, and the flash. So it's sick. It's you know, I've traveled with it at 48 pounds. US limit is 40. African limit is 15. So I've always gotten there with my gear. One of the things I love about the vest, I can have a 40-pound bag, and when they tell me that the bag's too heavy, I can make my vest weigh 40 pounds and that bag weigh nothing. And then one of the best tricks, I mean, the stories I could tell you about traveling, international travel, are you can almost always find a way. The best one was when I flew British Air when the agents were all Nazis. So I went in there and I'm walking in, and my friend Todd was a master. He'd have a 75-pound back on, and he'd just watch the guys when they would be talking to somebody, and he'd just walk right up the middle at 100 miles an hour and never get stopped. Me, I'm timid. I'm like, they're gonna get me, they're gonna get me. And this guy would come up to me. He comes up to me, and I got the 600 in there, and he goes, "Oh, that's a nice bag you got there. Seems about 17 kilograms, very nice. Unfortunately, the limit's 6 kilograms. You're screwed. You have to go back to the gate, get back to the checkers, and get a green tag. And I've already called them on my cell phone. So if you don't come back through here with the green tag, they're going to arrest you and put you in the brig for probably like 3 months." So, okay, Jack, okay. So I go back and I get a green tag. This is a true story. And I'm walking down, and I got the 600 in there and a bunch, and the 100 to 400. The first time in London where we had to change airports. And I'm walking down, and they got this long jetway. I'm looking for cameras. No camera in the jetway. So I go down, I open my 600, I open my bag, and I take the 600, it's almost time to go. I take the 600 without a camera body on it, of course, because you never want to travel with your body test. I take the 600 and I put it on my back like this, and I put my laptop bag over on top of it. And I got my rolling bag, and I come up to the door to the flight attendant, and they go, "Oh, how are you today? I see you got a green tag on there. How come they made you check it?" I said, "They said it was too heavy. I don't get it." She picks it up and goes, "Oh, that's fine. Go ahead on the plane." So I've almost always come up with a way, including putting 40 pounds of stuff in here. In Africa, once it took a $20 bill. So, I've always got, I've never had to leave my gear behind and get on the plane. This trip, I thanks to, God bless, Canon and the auto chain, I have my SUV here, so I have all the lenses. But you can generally get a lot of gear with me. When I go to Bosque and I'm in the US, I send some stuff by UPS ground. And one thing I should mention, I taught school for 23 years in Bushwick. And not only did I survive, but I prospered. But my main point is that I've been so blessed in my life. I mean, most of you know that I lost Elaine to breast cancer in '94, and she was my best friend, biggest supporter. Now Denise is my best friend and my biggest supporter, and it's great having her in my life. And I'm so blessed. If anyone would have said to me, when I was quitting teaching, people said, make a living as a bird photographer? That's insane. It's too specialized, you can't do it. So the type of person that I am, all you need to do is tell me that I can't do it. So that was the end of that ball game. But if anyone, I mean, we've made a ridiculous amounts of money. If anyone would have told me how much money I would have made in the last decade, I would have taken the temperature. So I'm amazingly blessed. I have 4 great grandkids, and I'm loving what is, and you've been a great group. And I thank you all for coming. And we're going to wrap it up. Thank you. And then if there's any additional questions, you can come on up or pick up the lenses or play or whatever. So enjoy the holidays, and thanks for coming.
For more information, please visit us online, give us a call, or stop by our New York City Superstore. You can also connect with us on the web.